Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I am Joe.
This week on the show, Liam Neeson takes his particular set of skills to L.A. to solve his wife's murder in Taken 3. Steve Carell dons a fake nose and goes for Oscar Gold in Foxcatcher, and we'll review horror sequel The Woman in Black 2, Mark Wahlberg in The Gambler, and in our home media moment, Golden Globe Best Picture nominee Pride. Our triple feature of older films this week is new classic Side Effects, my pick for guilty pleasure old classic Burlesque, and Oscar-nominated The Apostle. And we also have some movie news to discuss after we get through our new releases. Before we start the show in general, though, the Golden Globes were earlier this week, and I'm just going to run down the list of all the winners and get your guys' reactions to them. Some of these were a little bit surprising to me. Boyhood won 3.
Nice.
Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Supporting Actress for Patricia Arquette.
Cool.
Really?
For Supporting Actor, J.K. Simmons.
Oh.
Nice.
Whiplash. And in the supporting categories, it's everything, both dramatic and comedic.
Okay.
And then everything else they separate, for the big ones. Best Actor in a drama was Eddie Redmayne for Theory of Everything.
Okay.
Actress was Julianne Moore in this movie Still Alice that I don't know when we'll ever get to see.
Heard about it.
Yeah, I've heard about it only from the awards buzz. Best Screenplay went to Birdman.
Makes
Nice.
sense.
Definitely worth it.
Again, that's good. That's both comedy and drama there. And then for the comedy, Best Picture was Grand Budapest Hotel.
Cool.
Best Actor, Michael Keaton for Birdman.
Yeah.
And this one will infuriate Justin. Best Actress, Amy Adams in Big Eyes. And the Best Animated Feature went to How to Train Your Dragon 2. So, thoughts overall?
As much as I did take issue with Big Eyes, at least I'm glad Amy Adams got an award because goodness knows
She needs one.
it's about time she got recognized or something.
How to Train Your Dragon 2 for Best Animated. I was a bit disappointed
Over
by
the
that
Lego movie was
Yeah.
surprising.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys supported him, but Redmayne I wasn't as crazy about.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I figured, but I wasn't blown away about it. It was a good performance, but to win Best, I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, I think it was well deserved on his part. He went more than enough into his character.
I mean, keep in mind, it is hard to say completely because some of these movies we haven't seen yet.
That's
True.
true.
You know,
true as well.
we're not going to see Selma till next week. Imitation Game, same thing.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit hard to compare Redmayne's performance with some of the ones we haven't seen. I mean, we have seen Steve Carell in Foxcatcher, of course.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about that later today.
It's a
But
performance from the nose.
yeah, the nose. But a lot of love for Justin's top 2 of the year, Birdman and Boyhood.
Yeah.
One in the comedy and one in the drama category. So we'll see what that means for the Oscars. It used to be that a Best Picture win almost guaranteed a win in the Oscar Best Picture. The last 5 years, that has not been the case.
Interesting.
So if that keeps up, then Boyhood may not win a Best Picture at the Oscars. So yeah, that's another Golden Globes in the books. I always find they're usually a little more fair with movies than the Oscars, and maybe that's because they have that comedy category.
They've got a wider range.
Yeah, I mean, Into the Woods got a few nominations, and
I just-
some other less, Oscar-y type movies.
By comparing the two ceremonies, I feel like the Oscars is definitely a little more narrow, a little more predictable, generally.
But it also begs the question of, are the people that are voting actually watching the movies? That's a whole different monster I don't want to get into.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
definitely a significant question.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, the Globes has a specific set of people that do it, the Hollywood Foreign Press. And you're right, the Oscars, who knows,
What they do.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really check that everybody's watching every movie. But all right, let's get into this week's new releases. And first up, we're going to talk about Taken 3. Joe's got that one.
Taken 3 is the third and final film in the Taken trilogy, bringing back Liam Neeson as the ex-Special Forces operative Brian Mills, Maggie Smith as his daughter Kim, and Famke Janssen as his now ex-wife Lenore, and Forrest Whitaker joins them this time around. This time, the Mills family is threatened, yet again, though in a slightly different way. Lenore is in fact taken and murdered, with Mills being apparently framed for the murder. He then goes on the run from the police while trying to track down those responsible, again, more Eastern European thugs. I saw the original Taken years ago and loved it. I think it was a very enjoyable action film and thriller that has become something of a modern classic for the genre and made Neeson an action star. I really never thought it was exactly a franchise starter, though, at least not with the same basic formula for each movie. Then again, since Mills' devotion to his family is the crux of the first film's success, I guess producers were hesitant to drop that. This movie is a mess. The level of logic that seems absent is nearly in every scene is ridiculous. Mills seems to have no qualms about endangering hundreds of lives, and for that matter, the police don't seem to either. The villain's plan is filled with so many holes. The police's only real reason to pursue Mills is because the script says so. Not to mention a really obvious twist and absolutely no tension, since the characters and the audience both know how this is going to end. There's no real threat here. Plus the fact that the editors have to cut every 2 seconds during action sequences, leaving them confusing and even sickening. The only saving grace is that Neeson is still doing his character as well as he can, and the few scenes with Smith still contain chemistry and a few decent emotional notes. It's essentially a waste of time that really did not need to be made, and I give it a D+.
Justin, how about for you?
I gotta say I've never been a real big fan of the Taken series, but I gotta respect the first one because it was simple yet effective. We had a character who knew what he wanted and how he was going to do it, and it really led for some decent tension. Taken 2 came along and essentially flushed that down the toilet with an overly long story where I kept finding myself questioning whether or not 20th Century Fox thought Taken was basically Die Hard. Taken 3 seems to think the exact same thing, just amping it up about threefold. It has some of the worst action editing I have ever seen, and quite possibly one of the dumbest police portrayals supporting actor Forrest Whitaker.
It's pretty bad.
There are plot holes, there's inconsistencies, there's horrible cinematography, action sequences are just barely passable, if at all. It is a goodbye to the Taken franchise and good riddance. F.
Wow.
Damn.
Justin's first F of the year.
Second
show in. This is... I love the first Taken movie. Second one was not good. And I really just... All I hoped out of this is that it was better than the second one. And you're both right. We didn't get that here. Nothing makes any sense. Justin, you couldn't be more right. Forrest Whitaker's character is completely inept and nonsensical. And Whitaker himself is just like sleepwalking through the role. This is an Oscar-winning actor. We've seen him do so many great things. I don't know what he's doing here other than eating bagels.
And yogurt.
Obsessively.
You know, the twist at the end is like, okay, but you're right, Joe. It's very obvious. And I'm really glad you both mentioned the editing.
Oh.
That is not something that typically catches my eye. But here, it's impossible to miss how terrible it is.
Like cut every 2 seconds.
Every 2 seconds, yeah. I don't, those guys' fingers were worked to the bone in the editing room.
No, it's literally like, I remember, like, I think it was like the second big chase scene where I believe that they were chasing Mills, the police were chasing him, and they would cut to the cop turning his car around, and then they cut to Neeson. So I'm like, wait. What's he doing?
Right. What
like,
happened?
I didn't like.
Is there any significance to this cut?
They wouldn't even show the exact transition to parallel things like in the traditional action car chase scene. You show the pursuee, the one being pursued, it turns. Then you show the pursuer turning the same way, like The Rock, for instance. Turn. You show outside the car, inside the car, outside, inside, and vice versa. This time we'll show the car, then inside the other person's car. So we're just going to assume they turned. I guess they did, but maybe they went a different direction. I don't know. I don't know if it's even that he was sleepwalking. I don't know if they told him how his character's supposed to act, because literally
they may not.
All that purpose of that cop was to do in that film was to just simply explain to the audience what we already know. Like, there's no way you can catch this guy. Don't even bother. Don't even look for him. Don't even investigate.
Yeah, we're going to do it anyway.
We're going to do it anyway. And he's smiling. He's smiling the whole time like, man, this is awesome.
But then, at one point towards the end, he finally says something like, well, that's a waste of time and manpower. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
And actually stuck to it.
Yes.
But the rest of the movie, it was just like anything goes. And also, this Brian Mills is like on the run from the law because he's the suspect in the murder. And yet,
there's really not that much evidence against him.
There's nothing against him other than he runs away.
Literally, if he didn't run away, it's fine. Because they even know what happened in Paris, Istanbul. People know who this guy is, so it's very unlikely. He spent the last 2 movies trying to save his family to randomly kill his wife.
Murdering his wife.
Like, that's like, the cops would be like, I I don't know.
And not to mention, Joe, you hit upon this. The family dynamic in the movie is probably the strongest thing it has going for it.
Ironically.
So you murder 1/3 of that family in the second scene of the movie.
It's a bad move.
It was a bad move.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, the best scenes in the movie for me were anything with that family dynamic. It was the only thing decent in the movie, which is pretty bad in an action movie. But hey, I'll take something.
Right.
Better than nothing.
I'm with you, Joe. I give it a D+. Neeson does give a good performance here, as always. And I'm not a huge fan of Maggie Grace, but their chemistry together is good.
Yeah.
And at least the two of them, above all else, have logic for everything they're doing. We may not
buy all of it.
We may not buy all of it. It wouldn't really happen.
No.
But it's better than... Did you end up seeing Taken 2, Joe?
No, I haven't. Okay. But I've seen enough to know
Justin
what happens.
will appreciate this then.
Go on.
It's much better than in Taken 2 when he's on the phone with her from the basement of the bunker and he's telling her to throw hand grenades on the building.
You have no idea how much I loathe that scene.
No one's looking around and seeing where are these noises coming from. It was so stupid.
I've heard about that scene.
At the very least, Taken 3 has the logic thing with the two of them at least down. But that's about it. Yeah.
If only slightly.
Yeah, if only slightly. All right, well, up next we have Foxcatcher, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
Despite both being Olympic gold medalists in wrestling, Mark Schultz, played by Channing Tatum, has always felt that he's been living in the shadows of his brother David, played by Mark Ruffalo. However, when Mark is recruited by multimillionaire John E. DuPont, played by Steve Carell, to put together a wrestling team for the 1988 Olympics in Seoul, Mark is immersed in a world of paranoid psychological mind games and tragedy. Director Bennett Miller definitely has a strong sense of how to frame his shots and get the most out of perspective and personality for his characters, but I feel like his biggest flaw is in how he chooses to tell the story. It's a film that really relies heavily on method acting, having the characters really envelop their roles, but it only seems like half of the cast was on board. Ruffalo, I felt, was kind of hit or miss. Some of the stuff he was in, he was great. Other times, just seemed a little bit dry. Carell is right on board. Tatum just doesn't have quite the chops for it, in my personal opinion. Obviously, he was a lot of fun in 21 Jump Street as well as 22, but I'm not entirely sure if this is the right role for him. His efforts are admirable, but it's hard to tell in the film if they're trying to make his character be brutish or just a man manipulated at the prospect of time in the limelight. And alongside this, the film leaves out really, really crucial details to the actual story, and instead just throws in these other scenes that have little rhyme or reason to them. It's a really well shot film, and at times it comes together beautifully, but it's got some really noticeable issues. I'm giving it a B+. I feel like the acting's there. I feel like the storyline is still very compelling, and the big finale definitely shocking, but it's definitely not without flaws.
I do think that the performances here are the main focus. Steve Carell is fantastic here. It's sort of a shame that all the great actors out there today that can sort of modify their voice a little bit, he's still Steve Carell plays John DuPont. I never really believed he was DuPont, but he still does a really good job here. I do agree with you. I'm a much bigger Channing Tatum fan than you are, Justin. I also felt that he is decent here, but not great.
Yeah.
And I do think Mark Ruffalo did a good job, though. I thought he was pretty on point, for most of his work. But I think the movie is creepy in the right places, but I'm not sure if it hits all the right notes as hard as it could. I'm not sure if that is because there is a lot of the story missing. For example, he really has it out for DuPont after a while because of some things that happened, and we sort of see a little bit of them. But all I could think of was, we just reviewed Unbroken on the show last week, and all I could think of is, okay, that's actually intense stuff that we see almost nothing actually happen in Foxcatcher, and Tatum's character all of a sudden just kind of turns, and so that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Unless I misconstrued what you said about Bennett Miller, Justin, I thought actually he did a really good job with the way he directs this, and I feel like as he did in Moneyball, the more hidden themes of the movie are done very well. Here, it's things like power, the American dream, how sports figures are viewed, and I think that is present, but it's not overbearing.
No, how he's setting up his ideas and how he's shooting the film using lighting to highlight certain things are really well done. It's just the sequencing of how he's telling the story is problematic to me.
I see. Well, overall, I give Foxcatcher a B. Joe, how about for you?
Well, I'm actually kind of glad you guys were kind of in the same thought I was, because I just felt like I was going to come away being maybe the only person that didn't think this movie was super amazing. There's something off about this movie. What really stands out for me, I agree, are the performances. I think Tatum and Ruffalo do a pretty good job. I think that trying to get having this brother bond based around just wrestling and having pretty much a more physical dynamic to express their emotions, I thought that was interesting. I liked that, and there's definitely a degree of subtlety in the film, but it's especially Carell, I think, disappears into a very different type of character. I was entranced for a lot of the film, but I felt like it was held back, and I don't know if it was necessarily the direction, because I think the direction was actually really good. I think it might have been a script issue, because it's really trying to tell two stories. It's the story of a wrestler and his personal struggle and the relationship he has with his brother, and the story of this tortured aristocratic soul. And it doesn't really quite give us enough of each story, or even enough to connect them. So I just left the film feeling like I was leaving something. As great as these performances are, I felt like I still didn't know these people as well as I could, and I was left with many questions. Something was missing, but there's still some real hints of greatness. I'm going to leave it with a B+ too.
I mean, I'm definitely with you, Joe. I feel like they were trying to create a parallel between the two, because obviously they're both sort of standing in the shadows of someone else in their lives, but they just aren't doing it that smoothly, and they're just sort of brushing along the edges.
I definitely got the themes. I got some of the ideas. There was definitely subtly something really intense going on. I could see some hints of it, but the truth is, there simply are parts of the story I feel like we're missing. I don't know what happened, to be honest.
I don't either.
I was like, what happened that caused this dramatic change? What led this person to doing this?
That leads to the crucial details part I'd explain, but I'm not entirely sure if it counts as a spoiler.
I think most people would watch it, maybe unless they know a lot about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they would come away with it. Okay, something happened. There were some issues, but I'm not entirely sure what they were.
Right.
It's I get, based upon these people and the way that they bounce off each other, there's this underlying tension. You kind of get hints of it from what they tell us.
Right.
But I just feel like they didn't tell us enough. I felt like it was, you could almost do a whole movie just about Tatum's journey, or just about Carell's journey. You could have done two separate movies and they would have been fine. It's just that neither one gets quite fleshed out enough. Or they could have just added more time. But there's what happens, and then there is that after part, kind of the epilogue,
which is completely unnecessary.
And I was just so he was unaffected by this?
Right.
What? I didn't quite get that. I was impacted emotionally, but I wasn't entirely sure how.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, it definitely makes sense. I feel like this is one of these movies that was sort of made to be an awards season darling, and I mean, it's good.
It's just not great.
But it's not great.
Not quite.
And obviously, Steve Carell does a great job, but yeah, it's just not all connecting there with his character and his relationship with everybody else. His relationship with the mother is pretty well defined.
It is.
That's decent, and she shows up when she needs to. But the relationship between him and Tatum and him and Ruffalo,
it's a bit iffy.
It's very enigmatic.
It's not well defined
from what we see anyway.
No.
And I do think that's a problem.
Do you guys think more time in the film would have made a difference, or should they have just cut some stuff down?
I mean, it's already two and a half almost. Yeah, 2:14, whatever. No, I don't think it needs more time. I think it needs more focus, honestly.
Well, there literally are scenes where the characters will kind of say what the film's about. DuPont kind of gives his little speech about the American dream. I'm like, okay, instead of this scene where you're basically literally telling the audience what the theme of the movie is, why don't you actually have a scene where these two people talk and get to know each other and express the themes that way? That way, we'll see their relationship better defined in a more natural way, Something like that.
Yeah.
Utilize some scenes better, because there were entire segments where there's really not much going on.
Well, and there's a lot of scenes of just the wrestling stuff.
That was where I was going with that.
That's where you can cut it and then add in some of that other stuff that we're missing.
Mm-hmm. I felt like one or two of those were okay, but it's trying to do the things I think director Steve McQueen is really good at, in terms of letting letting the actions highlight the important moments in the actual storyline.
That's what he's going for.
But it's just becoming sort of tedious after like the third instance.
You're right. That's what I'm saying. There's that lack of focus there where you have part of the story that's like the sports drama, but that's not really the story.
Right.
It's cool, but I mean, I think after maybe one or two wrestling matches, I think we get the point.
Right. I agree. All right, well, up next we have The Woman in Black 2, Angel of Death. This takes place about 40 years after the original film in World War II London, and in it, an elementary school gets evacuated due to bombings, moves them to a countryside town. The teacher, Eve Parkins, played by Phoebe Fox, gets a not-so-subtle message of doom, saying the children will never escape, quote-unquote, her. Soon, some of the children start seeing the Woman in Black, and eventually so does Eve, and then the real mayhem supposedly begins. Woman in Black 2 was directed by Tom Harper, with a screenplay by John Croker, and stars nobody that you would really recognize. So basically, no one from the original film is involved here, except for a couple of producers, so that's a bad sign right there. Not that the first one was all that good, but this movie is just so lifeless. It's not too scary and relies mainly on the most offensive horror cliche to me, the jump scare. Now, I will admit that shot on just $1 million, the tone is set right, and the setting and story actually are not bad, but it's just completely unmemorable and uninteresting. I give it a D. Justin?
$1 million.
Yeah, not bad.
I'd give them props for that if they got the tone right, at least.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's one word to sum up this entire review. Why? Now, admittedly, I didn't see the first Woman in Black. I did read a synopsis, so I wasn't completely out of the loop.
You don't need to, though. I mean, it's not like it's not any of the same characters.
No, I've heard very mixed reviews, but this to me personally felt like almost an entirely different storyline with just one or two ties to the prior film. And it doesn't even feel like a particularly original story about that. Everything I've seen much better in a different horror movie, much different elements, and far more effective scares, which are completely obvious, the twist even more so, and the lighting is far more obnoxious and horrific than any of the actual scares. It is my second F of 2015.
You're on a roll, Justin.
2 Fs in
one show.
2 weeks of the new year.
2015 does not bode
wow.
well.
Always gets worse before it gets better.
Well, I would say Taken 3 is definitely better than this, but not by much. I mean, this movie is bad. Joe, you didn't get to see it.
Well, you don't need to.
By your direction.
Why? Why would you? I mean, it's not...
You
didn't see the first one either.
I had a vague interest in the first one because of Daniel Radcliffe.
Well, that's, I think, why anybody went to see it.
And I was like, oh, well, I heard mixed things. I heard, I heard some people say it was terrible. I heard some people say it was decent.
I believe I gave it a C-.
That's what it looks like.
It was not very good.
It looks average,
Yeah. And this one is just... It's pointless. It serves no purpose. But it's true, Joe. This thing had a very small budget, and I thought tonally it was on the money. It's just that everything that came with it was uninspired, I would say. Don't think you missed out on anything too crucial there.
Doesn't sound like it, but no. I'm sure you'll send a few Fs my way. If they have to be seen.
Yeah, if they have to be seen, I would say go for it. I wasn't sure we'd get 2 Fs from Justin already. I knew this would be an F. That was an easy...
But you weren't sure about Taken 3.
I'm giving it a D. But Taken 3, Neeson was good.
Neeson was pretty good, yeah.
I didn't think that was going to be an F, but you never know.
Well, here's my dilemma with that. Taken 2 was terrible, but I gave it a D, and I think Taken 3 was so much worse.
Oh, that makes sense then, because I gave Taken 2 a C-. And so one notch down is Taken 3.
Yeah.
All right, so that makes sense. All right, well, enough time spent on The Woman in Black. Let's get on to The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, and that's going to be with Joe.
The Gambler is a crime drama remake of the 1974 film of the same name. It stars Mark Wahlberg, John Goodman, and Brie Larson. Jim Bennett is played by Mark Wahlberg. He's a literature professor with a severe gambling addiction, and he ends up owing $260,000 to the proprietor of an underground gambling ring, and to Neville, who is a loan shark, played by Omar from The Wire. Woo, he's getting work. Lee gives Bennett 7 days to pay off his debts or be murdered. The narrative tracks Bennett as he attempts to find a way out of his multiple debts. Also, he enters into a relationship with his favorite student, played by Larson. This is the kind of film that is generally up my alley. I felt that Wahlberg does tackle this rather complicated character rather well, but the rest of the cast was somewhat underutilized. Goodman, Jessica Lange, and Michael K. Williams, that's Omar, are barely supporting characters. The only one who really gets to shine with Wahlberg is Larson. However, I'm not entirely sure her character was really even necessary. The biggest problem here is the film doesn't seem to know what it is or exactly what it wants to say or do. On one hand, it has the components of a thriller. On the other hand, it's trying to be a character drama. Neither area seems quite fleshed out enough. While I do feel the message is clear at the end, the build-up was very uneven, sabotaging a potentially uplifting character arc. It doesn't help that Bennett is difficult to like sometimes. I wanted to like him, there just isn't enough of him that we know about. I left feeling unsure if this was even really an addiction for him, or if he was just a self-hating degenerate. Despite this, I was sufficiently entertained, and I would give it a B-.
Well, for me, I do think this is just a slow, lumbering, who cares kind of story. This guy is completely unlikable. He has zero regard for anybody, including his own mother. And we also get no background on their history. I thought Jessica Lange did a good job, but there's no reason for this dynamic they have that we see. And that was annoying, and it really made me like him even less. The Brie Larson bit seems shoehorned in at best, and awkward and completely unnecessary at worst. I'd love Brie Larson. We saw her in Short Term 12, which we all liked a lot. But her character just seems pointless, and really all of his interactions with his students seem kind of pointless. Either in the classroom or in the outside of the classroom stuff, that we see a couple people in. I think the performances are okay. I like Mark Wahlberg a lot. This is far from his best. John Goodman even is just sort of going through the motions, I thought, here. I give it a C-. Justin?
Although I wasn't able to see the original film before we got to this one, I think it's very clear, just given the style and the retro soundtrack, and just the general look at the camera work and editing. And I feel like that sort of leads to mixed results. Wahlberg's trying to get out of his element. I feel like, much like with Tatum, he's sort of biting off more than he can chew. Sometimes it works okay, other times not. I just think that it's never really made clear how the audience is supposed to take him, empathizing with him, because there's a sort of character arc, but it isn't really well developed until the last 10 minutes. Pity him because he's a self-loathing degenerate, or flat out despise him just given his nature in class, gambling, and so on and so forth.
That's kind of how I went with it.
Yeah. Or some variation between all three. Who am I to say? But it's not a bad film, but it's not a great film. The Gambler just is. I give it a C.
But it's not even his performance that's the issue. It really is this characterization of the guy. And I don't know whether that's in the writing, in the story itself.
Well, the way I looked at it was this. I felt like it's handled a bit awkwardly, and I think that part of the problem is I think they're trying to really go really complicated with it. Mm-hmm. I mean, in life, it's never that simple. It's never just like, oh, he's likable, he's perfect, he's got his one angle.
Right.
I think this guy is tough because it's like, there's a scene where his mother really helps him out, and then he kind of shoves it aside, and you're like, okay, do I hate him? Maybe, but then again, he might have a real addiction. Maybe he can't stop. The mother doesn't believe it, but gambling's a real addiction. But then again, maybe he's trying to do it so that he doesn't hurt her anymore. It's another way you could look at it. I felt like there were scenes where we see it from multiple perspectives. Like, he's really not trying to always be as hateful as he is. He just kind of feels like he's trapped. And there are other scenes where he kind of contradicts that, and maybe he just thinks he's better than everyone else. Well, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other big thing. He acts very pompous at times. He also seems to be hitting home this idea of success in life is not so simple.
No.
And it's a cool idea, and I think that's where they're trying to go with the classroom scenes, but there's only like 2 or 3 of them, and then we never really come back to them.
It's funny. I think that's one thing I did like about the film. I think it's trying to tackle some pretty big ideas. Obviously not perfectly, but I think there is a lot going on under the surface there. It's weird. When I was watching this and they had the classroom scenes, I know they weren't exactly the most realistic part, But after God's Not Dead, I feel like it was significantly better. But the
I'll take anything.
With the kind of the a-hole professor. But I liked those scenes a lot. I thought they were actually some of the strongest in the movie. But I'm thinking, why are these scenes in this movie called The Gambler, which is supposed to be like this thriller, and they're the strongest parts for me? I just felt like it really kind of made the film very uneven in that sense. Like, I kind of wanted more of those scenes. Like you said, there's only a couple, and they seem to explain so much about it. But then we should just watch The Professor.
Right.
I
think
I don't get it.
I think it would have definitely helped the audience understand the character. Because you're right, those are the only scenes that we really do see any sort of
insight,
almost humanization, though. It's like everything else is just, well, oh, Mom, you're going to give me $480,000. Bye. I don't even think he said thank you. And then he goes from that to John Goodman's character, who's like this loan shark guy.
But he's trying to help him out. Like, do you really want to do this? Don't do this. Get out. And then it's like,
yeah, but he's not trying to help himself. Yes, Goodman is.
Goodman's trying to help.
Goodman's great, as always.
Yeah.
He always chooses good characters, but he isn't helping himself, and he's just completely uncaring about anybody that gets in his way. And I think the classroom is the only time we got to see any sort of furthering of character.
Who this guy actually is.
Yeah, and you're right. We only get it maybe 3 times.
Well, it's complicated because even with that, it's almost like, what exactly is this guy about? Because you're right, I'm not sure. Like, he wants to go through with it to what? Because he gets off on the thrill?
Right.
Because he wants to make something himself? To punish himself? Like, because you're right. If he took that money and wasn't, ungrateful to his mother, the movie would be over.
Right.
So there's no plot. So it's like, okay, I kind of liked how they tried to resolve it.
But what's the background?
Why is he so compelled to do this?
Why is his mom, why is she giving you $500,000 and then you don't even say thank you? Like, there's obviously a huge backstory there.
There is huge, because there was that one shot at the beginning where you see there's obviously some tension. They briefly mention the father, who is absent.
For a second, yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, what happened to Dad? Well,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You're right. There is... He's not quite clearly defined. I think that might have been intentional, but I don't know. I can understand why it's hard to get behind that. But I was kind of fascinated by it. I thought when they actually completed the character arc at the end there, I thought they went so over the top with it.
It was a little ridiculous.
Like that scene just kept going. I'm like,
we get it.
Get it. Like,
yeah.
So I don't know.
That is true.
I guess that's some good character development, but I thought it was a little too much, right, Justin? A little much, maybe?
Oh, hands down.
I thought that was
admittedly kind of a pompous end to a pompous character, but
yeah, but at least he grew. I thought he grew at least by
something better than nothing, I guess.
Yeah, but we still don't know grew from what.
Yeah, like he's
he
gets past it, but why was he in it in the first place?
Right. All right, well, our final movie in the new release section of our show is our home media moment, and that is Pride, which was lost out to Grand Budapest Hotel at the Golden Globes, but it was up for Best Comedy Film. Based on the 1984 true story of British gay and lesbian activists who raised money to help affected families in a miners' strike, the film was directed by theater director Matthew Warchus in his film debut, and stars mostly unknowns in the youth roles like Dominic West, Andrew Scott, and Paddy Considine, but 2 of the elders of the cause are played by Bill Nighy and Imelda Staunton, whom you'd likely recognize. Guys, I loved this movie. At award season anymore, it's almost all about these true stories. Entertainment Weekly, in fact, just did an article in last week's issue about how it's almost doubled since last year. We've already seen Wild, Unbroken, and Foxcatcher. Many more to come in the few weeks to follow. And though some are really good movies, none of them are much fun. Pride is fun. It's made in the tradition of other British working-class comedy dramas like Billy Elliot, and it has that same feel of enjoyment while making incredibly on-point observations and never forgetting what's important about the story. Now, there may be too many characters to get to know. That may be one issue with the film, but the ones that are shined upon most really get their due and make us feel for the plight. Now, I don't know if you guys know this. I was disappointed to see that the DVD packaging in the United States makes no mention of the gay angle of the story, focusing solely on the activism. Yeah, it was a big to-do.
Wow.
There's even a photograph altered on the back cover with like a gay and lesbian banner removed. So
Holy
it was
cow.
obviously done on purpose. So some more conservative viewers may be surprised by what's on the screen, which I think is infuriating because the gay part of the story is as important, if not more so, than the activism.
But it's called Pride.
But it's called Pride, I know. Obviously that's more of a marketing issue than an issue with the film, so I can't hold it accountable, but I thought it was a little ridiculous. I might be a little bit biased here. Obviously, movies with a theme of the downtrodden gays is a bit more relatable to me, but I think Pride is a movie that anybody fighting for any cause they feel strongly about and seeing opposition can relate to, and I give it an A. Justin?
All right. Well, what I love about movies like Pride is they get their point across without becoming preachy or downplaying the serious component of the story. It tells a story that's both funny and touching, but also really tackles these important issues and, like you said, Dan, observations. And the end result is really, really fun. It's surprisingly well written. The cast, both young and old, give great performances. My biggest issue with it is I feel like at times there's a little too much going on, and I feel like sometimes it gets a little predictable. But overall, I thought Pride was a very well told, very well acted, just genuine good experience for a 2-hour ride. I give it a B+.
Okay. Joe, how about for you?
I think Pride definitely has a good story, and as you mentioned, the ones that are based on true events usually seem to produce pretty solid narratives. Mm-hmm. There are some good performances, and now that I know they're mostly unknowns, that's impressive. And I do think that everyone really is having a good time. It is a fun movie. It's got a well-meaning message with genuine heart. Sweet as it is, though, I feel like it doesn't really bring anything really new to the table, but it's a good watch. I think as I was watching it, I was comparing it to Normal Heart, which I think is a similar subject matter, which I thought was excellent. So I would actually leave this one with a B.
Okay. Well, and I think the difference between, speaking of Oscar-type movies, Dallas Buyers Club and The Normal Heart and something like this is that those movies really focus on the plight of the homosexual lifestyle as it relates to their health crisis, AIDS. I mean, this is more of a, oppression just based on the sexuality rather than, there's no harm really coming to them physically.
No.
I mean, obviously Normal Heart and Dallas Buyers Club are intensely grave situations for a lot of the characters involved. Nobody's life is on the line here, but it's still...
livelihood?
Yeah, it's their livelihood. It's their pleasure, Oh,
I mean, I understand that. I thought it was fine. I just felt like it, even for something like that, I felt like it was still lacking a little bit of that bite. Like, I tend to like movies that actually really get you, and I feel like there probably have been movies... well, another example, Philadelphia. I mean, that tackles both. I mean, there is the health issue, but also discrimination based on, the sexual preference. A very personal story, maybe more character-based, much more focused.
But again, those are all dramas, too.
And I guess...
Pride is basically a drama, but it's definitely got some funny moments.
Is it a drama? I thought it was more of a...
I would definitely agree with the Golden Globes putting it in the comedy category.
Yeah, I felt like...
For sure.
Maybe that's how I looked at it, because I was expecting a drama, and maybe I thought it was a little too lighthearted, which was fine. But I guess I feel like the lightheartedness kind of detracts from the seriousness of it. Maybe I'm used to seeing it portrayed more dramatically, but...
Right.
But here's my counterpoint to your statement that everything that's doing it has been done before. I feel like the way they handle it in terms of how are we going to make this community overcome the adversity by seeing the parallels of oppression through the working man and through the gay community is really interesting. Mm-hmm. And getting the whole community to see the gay community as quote-unquote normal as well.
That is fine. And I think that in this particular subject matter, maybe it hasn't been done too much before. But there have been a lot of movies about oppression that have showed the other side in similar manners. Maybe with the homosexual community, but I mean, plenty of movies about racial oppression. Very similar, like, hey, you've seen it before, Matewan, right, Justin?
Most of it.
Well, you know how,
I get where you're coming from.
Okay, we have to, strike against them. Oh, well, I don't want to strike with the black people, but they have the similar plight, so let's get together. There have been movies like it where it's been done, but of course that was also very serious too. So maybe...
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe what does separate Pride from a lot of these other movies about things like oppression. Because oppression, obviously, is not a fun topic.
No.
It does happen, it's real, and it sucks for the people being oppressed. Mm-hmm. And we see that time and time again in a lot of movies. But here I feel like they're really getting to the spirit of being gay in the 80s in England. And having issues and having problems, but dealing with them in ways that are maybe a little bit different than, the African American community deals with it, or, other communities. And that's not to say that, all gays, let's go party and have a parade, and, but that's what these particular people did, and it worked for them in this instance.
Nobody becomes a caricature.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Nobody becomes silly, nobody becomes, that wacky gay over there, it never becomes that. And I think that's one thing that Pride has going for it in its writing and in the actors themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Well, up next, we're going to break from the reviews for a second and talk about a news item. Justin brought this to the table, and Joe actually has a video already up discussing this topic on the Merlin channel. So, Justin, why don't you tell us about Ghost in the Shell here?
Scarlett Johansson has supposedly, I don't know if this is official yet or not, been selected for casting for an American remake of Ghost in the Shell, which was a very popular anime in 1995 based on a manga of the same name that has influenced everything from The Matrix to video games to just how we look at the world today. Very, very culturally significant. I know Joe and I go a little bit back and forth in terms of Hollywood whitewashing, but for an American remake, I feel like you need to cast American actors. Is it necessarily right? I don't know. However,
Joe, before you answer, some of our listeners may be in the dark about this movie. I've never seen it. I know what it is. Obviously, the characters are Japanese in the original manga,
yes.
or
Well, it takes place in Tokyo.
okay.
So,
but I
so
mean,
there
you can
you
always
go.
restructure that to like Manhattan or something like that.
So the debate is, with this being a live action movie, why are we casting the whitest of the whites with Scarlett Johansson, pretty much, I guess.
Well,
right?
I think it's not necessarily a racial thing, because really what it gets down to is that it is a different culture, it's a different medium. So the biggest problem is that the history of anime adaptations to film in the West has not been good, and Ghost in the Shell is...
Though to be honest,
Sacred.
when your reference points are Dragon Ball Evolution and Fist of the North Star, I'm not entirely sure if that statement's fair.
It's fair.
Okay.
Because no, all right, like you, all right, you say that, Justin. It's true. You're right, but it's still anime, and a lot of the different stylistic elements of anime are present in Ghost in the Shell, as in something like North Star or Dragon Ball. They're very different. You're right, but the point is, even something like Speed Racer, which you think is easy to transfer.
That's true.
Had a lot of issues
that movie
too.
was awful.
And that's...
I don't hate it quite as much.
Oh, I
as
gave
you
it
do.
an F. I hated it. It was terrible.
My point is, that's an example.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that was popular in the U.S. that people knew
Yes,
about.
that's
was
true.
easy to transfer, and still doing it to film, trying to keep all the same elements, it's tough. Admittedly, Ghost in the Shell is less cartoony than something like Dragon Ball or North Star, but it's still very ingrained in Japanese culture and ideas.
That I can agree
And
with.
though it has influenced a lot of things in the West, if you're going to transfer it, you have to be really respectful to the source material, which Hollywood has proven it does not care about with anime.
First of all, the big issue is Hollywood hasn't adapted a lot of anime, and the ones that they have, I don't think lend themselves well to Americanizations.
It's possible.
In live action. Ghost in the Shell, I think, has the opportunity to, but my biggest issue with Ghost in the Shell, was a very big fan of the movies as well as the show in high school, is the fact that the first movie, anyways, is extremely, extremely complicated.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on, not only in terms of action, there's plenty of it, but there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of philosophy. Think like The Matrix, but about tenfold.
It's a very complicated story. I'm not entirely sure, and I think this is where we're going with Justin, if it's really the most accessible piece.
That's more of my concern, more so than the whitewashing. Hollywood's going to do what they do, regardless of whether or not I'm on board. The question for me is, are they going to do it justice? Are they going to be able to convince audiences that this is a good idea and keep a faithful adaptation?
But I will say this. Scarlett Johansson, I'm not worried about, though.
No,
Because
She always does well.
she's a capable actress. Yeah. I'm sure she looked over it. She probably knows something about it. She's proven she's diverse with action roles. I mean,
that is true.
She likes to tackle big things like Lucy. Mm-hmm. She's great as Black Widow. And then she's proven she's comfortable with the nudity. There's a lot of that that goes to the Shell.
Okay.
So we saw that in Under the Skin. And a more robotic personality. She can do it in Under the Skin. So she's proven she has range. She can do it. I'm fine with her. But still, like I said, history of anime adaptations to film, not the best track record. regardless. Now, I know that we're talking about it mostly, Justin. I'm curious, though, Dan, with what little you know about it, how do you feel about this? Because I know you know a little bit about this.
Yeah, I mean,
this issue.
I know about, how popular the movie is, and I'm sort of with Justin on the sense that I think Hollywood sometimes has a very small regard for its source material, and I do think that the anime community is very particular about, hey, this is our stuff, don't mess with it kind of thing.
That is true.
I mean, at least all of my friends that are big into anime, sort of, it's sort of, this is our thing. And I feel like the way Hollywood tends to deal with things is not with the most grace.
Well,
so I don't know. I mean, in terms of how well it will play, I don't know. I don't think of this as a big budget summer tentpole movie unless they just sort of use Ghost in the Shell in name only and sort of
do their own thing
with it.
One thing, Justin, I think I should point out, though, you're right. Some of the things they've attempted to adapt may not lend themselves that well. But the point is, you can still tell the studios did not care. You've seen those movies. They cut the budget. They didn't cast the best actors. They didn't really try.
No.
So, I mean, that still hurts it if you don't try.
Well, and we've seen that over and over in 2014 just with movies in general. Dracula, Hercules, Frankenstein. I mean, all of these classic works of fiction that they threw Exodus even, the Bible. They just threw everything out the window and it didn't matter.
Works. That's a good point. That's
and so anime aside, I feel like we're getting into this bad trend here of just sort of desecrating, some popular works here.
You're right. If they don't care about the Bible, they're going to care about some anime.
Right.
Though the one other thing that interests me a lot with this is supposedly the choice for director, who I believe is official, Rupert Sanders, who you both may know from Snow White and the Huntsman.
Okay.
Which I liked.
Sounds all right.
I'm kind of on the fence. Admittedly, I don't know how much else he's done. But, I mean, he at least made the visuals of Snow White and Huntsman look cool. So
some people like that movie, so...
Could have been a whole lot worse.
Well, it'll be, I guess we'll see probably in the next, 2 to 3 years, I
More
suppose,
or less, yeah.
by the time it gets off the ground. All right, well, we're going to close our show with our triple feature of older films, and we kick that off with new classic Side Effects. And that's with Justin.
After finally being reunited with her imprisoned husband, played by Channing Tatum once again on the show, Emily Taylor, played by Rooney Mara, has a series of bizarre emotional episodes that has her psychiatrist, Jonathan Banks, played by Jude Law, struggling for a solution. Banks prescribes the experimental drug Ablixa for treatment, which leads to unfortunate consequences and a desperate search to find the truth. I love this movie as much as I am completely frustrated with it. I have never been a big fan of director Steven Soderbergh, but when this was announced as the beginning of the end of his career, and then he finished everything off with Behind the Candelabra, which was in my top 20 originally in season 1, he really did begin to start to go out with a bang. Many films come out each year that sort of try to emulate the themes and styles of Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense himself. I feel like Side Effects really hits that home and manages to make it its own. I feel like it's really well written. There's not a minute wasted. Rooney Mara does a fantastic job, as she usually does. Easily the best part of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. And honestly, the twists and turns never get old, and the final reveal makes it all the more worth it. For me, it's a very solid movie. I give it an A.
Yeah, I mean, this is a thriller in the most classic sense of the word. It really does harken back to some of those Hitchcock classics. It's certainly not believable at all times, but it does suck you into the action and hold on. I think there are incredible performances here, really from all three of the main leads. Catherine Zeta-Jones has been on a really terrible streak lately. This is the first really good performance I've seen her in, maybe since Chicago. I don't know. But she's really good here. And it sort of gives me hope for some sort of maybe comeback, because I do like her a lot. She's very good here. None of the characters are particularly likable. And so it's a testament to the performances and to the writing and possibly to Soderbergh's directing as well, that we can sort of get on board with the story. Because it's one of these stories where you don't necessarily really root for anybody because everyone's terrible. But it still works because of the thriller aspect of it. So for me, Side Effects gets an A-. Joe?
I kind of like Jude Law's character.
Yeah, well...
But he did have his flaws.
Yeah, I mean, he had flaws.
Of the three, he was the best, I guess.
I'll
give you that.
The least bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought he was okay. Well, for me, Side Effects just has great performances from everybody. I really liked everyone in this movie. It has an intriguing plot, and it has a decent twist, though I thought it was slightly predictable. Maybe not with all the details, but generally, I kind of thought I saw where it was going. We need more thrillers like this. That actually reminded me of the 90s, when they just pumped a few of these out each year. Just some really decent thrillers. I consider 90s kind of the decade of that, really.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely.
It offers a lot of complexity without too much spectacle, and I leave it with an A- as well.
Okay.
Had you seen that one before?
Nope, first time.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the first time I saw it, I gave it a B+, and I think by the end of the year, even without watching it a second time, I think I bumped it up to that A-. It's a very intricate story, that we don't see a lot of anymore. You're right. That was more kind of a 90s thing, or before that,
No, really,
in the 60s, with Hitchcock.
You just don't see that many movies nowadays that really make you think. You don't have many good psychological thrillers like that anymore. Everything is much bigger.
Without being a loud bloodbath.
It's kind of like Trance in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, more or less.
It's not completely in your face. There's just a lot of intertangled webs that you're weaving there.
Which I like a lot.
You don't see that much anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
A quieter, darker kind of picture.
I'm surprised, Justin, that you don't like Soderbergh that much.
Me too.
I feel like some of his stuff's kind of dry. Like Ocean's 11 was never a big fan of.
Everything I've seen, did he do Traffic? Because I've never seen that, but that people seem
Yes,
to like
I
that.
haven't seen Traffic.
That's probably the big one that I've never seen. But everything else I've seen from him, I really enjoy.
I really like Traffic. I think I like most of his movies from what I can recall.
Yeah, I know Justin's not a huge Magic Mike fan. I liked Magic Mike.
Magic Mike was
It was
decent.
fun.
I thought that was going to be the one that was like going to finally get me on board with him, and it's like, nope.
Yeah, you really hated that movie.
It was not for lack of trying, I assure you.
What
Yes.
did you give Magic Mike? I don't think I ever really asked you.
Is it D+ or something?
It was not a D+,
C-?
it was a C-.
That's too low.
Oh, wow. You really don't like
I've seen that movie 5 times.
Oh,
It's
I've
so
seen
great.
it 3.
I have to say, originally, I was almost on board. I think I was like C+ originally. And then the more times I saw it, I think I ended with a B+. I really like Magic Mike. It's a fun movie. It's dopey. But, I mean, it's not trying to be Side Effects,
Well,
But Justin is not a Tatum fan. What do you think of Channing Tatum in Side Effects?
Hey, he was pretty good in Side Effects.
He was pretty good.
But this, I thought he held his own within reason. I don't think he got as much development as he should have, but I think he served his purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that, incredibly demanding a role, but you do have to sort of have dramatic chops for it. It's certainly not a comedy, and he's not stripping, so, I mean...
No, I guess not.
Yeah, I mean, next to Rooney Mara, it's a little hard to be that great, I'll admit. She's pretty great in everything, you're right. But, I don't know. All right, well, up next we're going to do Guilty Pleasure. That's my pick for this week, before we get to Joe's next week. And for me, it was Burlesque. This is a 2010 musical drama starring Cher, Stanley Tucci, Kristen Bell, and in her feature film debut, Christina Aguilera. She plays Allie, an Iowan waitress who needs more out of life and moves on a whim to L.A. She finds herself with no job out there when she stumbles upon a burlesque dance club and scores a waitress gig after talking to the club's owner, Tess, played by Cher. But what she really wants is to be up on the stage. After being turned down by Cher a number of times, one of the other dancers, played by Juliana Hough, gets pregnant and leaves the show, so Allie gets her chance, and of course surprises everyone, and her massive singing voice becomes the star of the show. There's also a romance and a whole thing about the club, about to close, but that's really the bulk of the story. I have to admit, I was truly shocked when I saw that this movie was at 37% on Rotten Tomatoes. I thought it would be much lower. It is a favorite for musical fans and certainly any self-respecting gay, but it's a pretty terrible movie. I don't think so, though. I love this movie. If you take away the horrible love triangle, the complete absurdity that this club would even exist and be so popular, and the part where Cher tells Christina Aguilera that putting on makeup is like painting on a face, you have some classic staples of old musicals, especially those in the Bob Fosse tradition, like a chorus line. There's extravagant costumes, lavish dance numbers, and fantastic songs that will stick with you for days. And the performers are all really game here and having a blast. This movie makes me feel great, gets my toes a-tapping. It is a B+. Now, before we were doing the show, Joe, you said to me that I have quote-unquote lost the Guilty Pleasure Month contest. I didn't realize there was quite a contest to bring the absolute worst movie you could. But I will admit, I am curious to see what you guys think of it. Joe, what did you think of Burlesque? Obviously, if you're saying that, you didn't hate it.
Well, I think this movie excelled in costumes and mostly good music. And the basic premise is okay. The performances are all pretty decent, even for Aguilera, which kind of surprised me. The problem with me was that the script overall is pretty bad. The characters are all underdeveloped, and there are all these inconsistencies just all over the place in terms of even something as basic as the geography of the club, like the size of the stage changes, and the amount of women dancing changes. Also, Aguilera's character, Allie, seems to be able to do literally no wrong, being able to charm her way out of any situation, no matter how ridiculous. Literally, she gets a good line against everybody, even when she shouldn't. It was like, you're not that smart, except
she's got to come back for everybody, Joe.
Yeah, man. This leads to the biggest issue for me, though, and it's just that I can't really get too invested in a story when I don't really care about the plight of the characters. There's just no tension, not even really a plot, just a variety of music video segments connected by a dry and rather hollow plot. Still, I think it was probably the goal of the movie, so I'm going to leave it with a C-.
Okay. Well, it's not a positive.
Not really. It's not a positive.
So that's what I expect out of Guilty Pleasure, I think.
Yeah.
Some positive, some negative. Justin? I can't imagine you're higher than Joe on this.
I'd be surprised, honestly.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised. No, I figured.
Much like my takes on the films of Baz Luhrmann, Burlesque is complete absurdity with many, many, many wild visuals. The difference is, for me, I know Luhrmann knows his way around a camera and is able to really make the visuals pop. Burlesque is trying to be Bob Fosse, but essentially being this more dirty striptease equivalent of Bob Fosse. Cher obviously can act and gets easily the best song number in the entire film.
Or any film.
Or any film,
oh, wow.
for that matter, I guess. But Aguilera just cannot act. The acting is really choppy. And around Act 2, it just feels like the musical numbers almost completely take hold of the film and the storyline's just more or less of a secondary thing. Though, for all my gripes, and obviously I have many, I do have to admit, once you get past the flimsy story and the length and the deafening soundtrack, it is a lot of fun. I can't say I was ever completely uncomfortable watching it, but it's just not a good movie. I give it a C-.
Okay, so the same exact grade as Joe.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, these are both negative grades. I wouldn't say I, picked a winner here.
No.
I mean, I picked a winner in terms of Guilty Pleasure.
No, but I don't think you were aiming for, the worst thing
I wasn't aiming... Listen, there can only be one Rocket Man, okay? I think we've all established that. Joe, I'm dying to see what you're going to bring to the table next week, because I'm sure it's going to be great or horrible or both.
Well,
Ernest Scared Stupid.
I really am just I don't know if I want to top Rocket Man. I think I might be able to.
I don't know if there's a way to.
I think so. I know for a fact that Justin will probably hate this movie.
Okay.
I don't know about you, though.
I might like it.
You might. But it's pretty bad. And
this is pretty bad.
No, well, yes, your movie...
And pretty amazing.
Yes, I can see somebody enjoying it.
Yeah.
But it has a lot of really obvious flaws.
Yeah.
But like I said, I thought the costumes were great. I thought the music was mostly good. And I do think some of the performances were good. Like Stanley Tucci's good.
Tucci is great.
Usually good.
He's usually pretty good. I mean, there were good things in the movie.
Right.
I just felt like the core of the story was just...
the story is the most threadbare thing. to string together some songs that you could come up with.
It barely exists.
And I think we can all admit, makes no sense.
Yeah.
The fact that, first of all, it's not 1925. Why does this club even exist? And why are people flocking to it in droves to see women not take their clothes off, but just dance around a little bit and lip sync to records?
Yeah.
That right? Didn't make sense. Well, the biggest problem I had, which is another example of the tension, is that like one of the big plot points is that Cher is having trouble keeping your club together, but the place is always packed. It's a hit, and I'm just like, how are you running out of money? And like, we got to sell these costumes.
Well, I mean, you and I saw it ourselves, Joe. I mean, clearly they don't turn off the lights, so they're running up the electric bill.
I guess, and I guess they're paying all their dancers like big bucks.
I guess so.
Well, they go out for pizza every night.
Which,
bless you.
Thank you. Which, by the way, I thought was kind of ripping off Miss Congeniality. Where they go out for pizza.
A little bit, yeah.
Which I thought was better when they went out for pizza. It was a big deal.
It's hard to beat Miss Congeniality, I'll give you that.
Now, is that a guilty pleasure, though?
No, that would be Miss Congeniality 2 if there is somebody that likes it.
I kind of like it, so I'll give that.
Okay, there you go. But she also has an entire fleet of dancers and the band and Alan Cumming at the door giving the tickets. She's paying a lot of people, even though it's packed.
I mean, technically speaking, from a business perspective, wage for employees is usually the highest cost.
That's true. And she's got a bartender, a couple bartenders, a couple waitresses.
She could probably cut a few people.
Yes.
But I guess she's a nice person.
She was a very nice person, as Cher is. But I do have to say, Justin, I don't agree that Christina Aguilera stunk in this. I think she's a pretty decent actress.
All right, you know what?
I'm not saying she's winning awards, but for what the role requires here,
you know what?
She's fine.
I'll say this much. Considering what the movie is, her acting is not fantastic or anything.
No.
But considering she's playing a bubbly blonde with no character, she does fine.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, really.
I mean, that's fair. Is it really her fault or is it just bad writing?
I think it's hard to tell.
I'd say it's probably 50-50.
Like, the writing's not great.
The writing's
no one's saying it was.
I have to say the writing is
mediocre at best.
It's really the good performances that uplifted it all. Like, people are having a good time with the movie, which I think is the most important thing. There were good things in it. I could appreciate it as a guilty pleasure. I don't think it's like
no, I definitely don't fault you for running it.
The worst thing ever, but I definitely could see the problems.
All right, well, we'll see what Joe brings to the table next week, and then we do have after that a listener's choice guilty pleasure, so you can get those into us. Film Fanatics with an exclamation point is the Facebook group, or you can just add a comment here to the YouTube video. All right, well, we close the show with our Oscar A to Z film. This one nominated for just one Oscar, but it was a biggie. Best Actor for Robert Duvall. It's the 1997 film The Apostle. And before we go to Joe for it, Joe, do you know who won that year over Duvall? One of your all-time favorite movies. Possibly in your top 25 of all time.
My top 25? Wow, now I feel real bad because I'm drawing a blank. 97. Was a good year for movies, I think.
Yeah.
Very good year.
And speaking of good, as good
as it gets. Jack Nicholson?
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep.
That's
Can't
deserved.
beat him.
Can't beat him. But, well, The Apostle is a 1997 drama written, directed, and starring Robert Duvall in the title role. Farrah Fawcett and Billy Bob Thornton have roles as well. But most of the cast are actually amateur non-actors to add to the realism the film's going for. Sonny, played by Duvall, is a charismatic Pentecostal preacher. His wife, Jessie, played by Fawcett, has begun an adulterous relationship with a youth minister named Horace. She refuses Sonny's desire to reconcile, although she assures him that she will not interfere with his right to see his children. She has also conspired, apparently, to use the church's bylaws to have him removed from power within the church. Much of the congregation sides with Jessie in this dispute. Sonny, however, refuses to start a new church, insisting that the one which forced him out was his church. At his child's Little League game, Sonny, in an emotional fit, attacks Horace with a bat and puts him in a coma, and possibly kills him. A fleeing Sonny ditches his car in a river and gets rid of all the identifying information. After destroying all evidence from his past, Sonny rebaptizes himself and anoints himself the Apostle E.F. He leaves Texas and ends up in the bayous of Louisiana, where he convinces a retired minister named Blackwell to help him start a new church. This film is one with a relatively simple plot, but following a very complicated and memorable character in Sonny. Duvall gives a fantastic performance as the devoted preacher. The film is also very believable, with some rather subtle, withdrawn shots and a lot of actors, as I said before, cast that were basically amateurs. Now, contrastingly, it has these subtle elements of the metaphysical and fantastical which I can appreciate. It's spiritual without being, dare I say, too preachy. It may not be the most exciting story, but it does provide a very interesting character for us to reflect on, and I leave it with a B+.
I'm pretty much in the same boat with you, Joe. I think Duvall doesn't need to be said, but gives a great performance here. But his directing is also pretty good. He directed this film, sort of a passion project for him that had been in the works for years. But I think therein lies a little bit of the problem, because he is a great character, but I think he maybe wanted to see himself on screen a little too much. A lot of these scenes go on far too long. By the end, you're almost watching an entire sermon here with this character.
Basically the whole last act.
I mean, it really is like a 20-minute, 25-minute sermon. That I could have done without. But he's a great character. He's completely flawed, but a typically sympathetic person also. You know, he definitely goes off the rails there in the beginning. You know, maybe some could see why. Maybe, you know, he goes a little too far. Don't know. But as the story progresses and he, you know, becomes this EF character, you really see what I think the character is really about. You know, that was my takeaway from it. So I give it a B+ as well. Justin?
Well, I think in most movies it's really a challenge to find an actor who's every bit as talented on camera as well as behind it. But I think Robert Duvall is right on board with this one. Although I think he takes about 20 minutes or so to get going with this movie. I wasn't really crazy about the flashbacks to his youth. Didn't really think that was necessary. But once it gets going and we see his new baptism and exploring his new life, the film really does start to shine. There's still one really unnecessary subplot, and I think sometimes he gets a little too much into his character. I couldn't agree more with the whole idea of last act basically being a gigantic sermon and the finale goes on 10, 15, even, maybe even 20 minutes too long. Mm-hmm. But overall, I thought this was a very pleasant surprise in our Oscar docket. I give it a B+ as well.
Now, Justin, let me ask you this then, because
Please.
We've obviously talked a lot on the show about religious movies.
I was going to bring it up.
And Christian films.
I was going to bring it up too.
I mean, this is... You know, I don't know if it's classified as a Christian movie, but it certainly got religious themes beating us over the head in that last scene for sure, which goes on, you know, far too long. So why does this movie work for you and others possibly don't in that regard?
Because this is possibly a good category for, I think, a decent Christian movie.
And I would agree with that. For starters, it's well acted and directed, which are two of the three holes that I mentioned for the what do Christian movies have to do to quote unquote win with
That's true. But to be fair, I don't know if you said it in that particular segment of when we talked about it, but you have said before you hate it when you get beat over the head with the message, whatever that message is.
Which I don't think they do too much with this. I feel like they come up with realistic, plausible situations and give us an actor like Duvall that's able to pull it off without becoming overly heavy-handed. Nothing seems ridiculously out of the ordinary. Nobody seems demonized, which is something I will always be scrutinizing God's Not Dead for. Hands down, quite
your favorite example in the category.
But I feel like this really came together well. The only real issue I had was when they introduced Billy Bob Thornton's character at the start of Act 3 for basically no reason other than we need a naysayer. And
he's a little bit marginalized. I don't know if he's demonized, but he's marginalized for sure.
He kind of is, but I mean, he comes in and out of the picture. He does a good job. It's just I don't really know where they were trying to go with the character, and I think the one scene that he has that I don't really like, which is part of the reason it gets B+ and not an A-, is a little over the top.
You have to admit, though, that last 25, 30 minutes is an entire sermon put to film. I mean, I may as well have been watching Jimmy Swaggart at that point.
Which speaks to my point of I think there are some points where Duvall gets a little too much into his character.
I'm not entirely sure it's like the entire film was funded by a church that has an agenda to convert you.
No, I agree.
I think it's just like showing the life of a man and his story that just happens to be very religious and spiritual in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I would agree with that. I mean, there have been several other movies that have come out since we've been doing the show that have hit that home as well. Calvary has some very spiritual themes, even though it deals with the crisis of faith. I obviously didn't give this one as high marks as The Apostle, but Heaven is for Real also tackles that a little bit. I would argue didn't go far enough, but not bad as in several others. I mean, the identical.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bad ones. I know that, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's also some good ones, not just.
Oh no!
This one just seemed to hit that theme very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that the entire genre, if we want to call it that, is always bad. It's just I don't think they always have the right people for the job.
All right, well, ending on a positive is always a good thing, and we will do that with The Apostle. So, Joe, lots of new stuff on your channel, and you're doing this new weekly news wrap-up kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll be doing it's basically, I think for now I'm going to try to do a live stream basically, so might not interact with people right away, but I'll just kind of hit a bunch of news items in different categories to kind of sum up the last week. And each week I'll be doing a revolving thing on Wednesday nights where I'll be tackling a different subject in a little more depth. So it'll be revolving week to week and month to month. So
Oh, very cool.
I'll be adding some stuff in, and there's a new channel trailer up, so it's entertaining.
I didn't see that.
Nice. Oh, I didn't know about that. I'll check that out. All right, well, that is going to do it for our show this week. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you have not thus far. You can join us over on the Facebook group as well, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and our Twitter feed is @FilmFanaticsPod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!